Again, as we go through today's webinar, please use the chat to chat with each other, which I see you're already doing. I knew that you would. And also to ask questions. As I'm going through today's webinar, I will stop every few slides and I will read the chat and see if there are any questions I can answer and try to get you that way. Raising your hand probably isn't the best way to get my attention because as I'm sharing my screen, I can only see five people at a time. So if you're not one of the five, I won't see your hand raised. So please do use chat to ask your questions. Finally, following this webinar, I will send all of you the slides from today in English and in Spanish so that they can be shared in your congregations and with your stewardship committees. And when the recording is done, I will share that with you as well. Welcome again, great to be here. So the theme for 2020 stewardship with TENS is faith-filled generosity. And what does this mean for us? As we have moved through Matthew's gospel this year, we've been hearing all about how Jesus teaches us to be in relationship with each other and with God. And this is really how we have moved through these parables, through the life of Jesus. It's been very much about relationship. And this relationship is an ancient one. It begins at the beginning of time as God creates and invites us into the ongoing creation. That's where our generosity, our abundance, the gifts that we share with each other are sparked and they come from in those moments. And this is how we see a faith-filled generosity. It's a journey that we are doing together this year and have been. So what's different about stewardship in 2020? What isn't different about 2020 in general? Everything's a little wonky this year. So what we're going to go through are some of the challenges that stewardship might face in your congregations this year as you run your campaigns. And the first one is that we're likely meeting virtually. I don't know what will happen in October and November, if some congregations will be able to be back in their buildings, we hope, but as of now, no. So we're still working through that. What is certain is that if we're not 100% meeting virtually, there will be, all of us will have some sort of hybrid thing going on in our congregations. And what that means for us as we are meeting virtually and as we are thinking about our stewardship campaign virtually, it means that there are people who want to participate but feel that they're not ready to come back into church yet. Maybe they are immunocompromised. They could have any number of reasons why they're not ready to be around a large group of people again after so long. So we are going to have to adapt and continue to offer our virtual services as we move into the fall and into next year until everyone really feels safe coming back into church again. That's a learning, and it starts, I think, our very first challenge this year will be with our stewardship campaigns as we try to negotiate this. We're in a period of economic uncertainty. Not every household is experiencing a pain point right now, but many are. And so it's very keenly felt in our faith communities as we are looking at our budgets, as we're looking at lost income and revenue from other things and space rental and preschools. I know I'm telling you all things that you know, but we are faced with this. And when we begin this year's stewardship campaigns, asking people to think about their gifts and think about their relationship to giving in the church, we're going to encounter these questions because we have them too. So that will be a challenge as we move through our stewardship this year. And then there's uncertainty about next year. 2021 is going to be yet different. We may have change in our politics. We may have change in the way we approach church. We're going to be continuing to face this adaptation and these changes, and it leads to uncertainty. How do we plan when we don't know what we'll be doing? What will our ministries look like? What will our staffing look like? How will our communities be gathering? So as we are asking people to invest in another year of ministry and think about their stewardship gifts, we are doing so when people have big questions about what next year looks like. So I'm going to go through these, and I'm going to start with the stewardship resources that TENS is offering this year. And then we're going to tease through some of these questions and some of the strategies for them. I'm going to make sure here that we don't have any participants trying to meet us. No, we're good. Great. So what do we look like this year, and what is TENS doing to help congregations get ready for virtual campaigns? So the first is that we remind you of a few things to think about as you move into stewardship season this year. The first is, what technology are you using to gather virtually? Well, you've been doing this already. If you're using Zoom or Facebook Live or Google Hangouts or Google Meets or YouTube to do church, you already have, and by now are some level of expert at these various online tools for communities and for how we are meeting virtually. So know your technology. Whatever you are using to engage your congregation in online worship is how you should also run your stewardship campaign this year, because by now your congregation is used to this platform. So that's just to say, don't change it up for stewardship season. Let's keep with what people have become used to. Another question we ask you as you're thinking right now about what your stewardship campaign is how are all of your media channels, your communication channels structured, and are they ready for stewardship this year? So that is to say, do you have ways to gather pledges and gifts online through your website, your social media, your streaming services, your newsletters? Do you have buttons that people can click to make a gift or to make a pledge? Have you looked at your website to make certain that there are those tools in place? We suggest that you use this time now to do that if you haven't, and to test them so that when it's time for stewardship campaigns, they're ready to go too. And also, have you looked at your newsletter recently? Many of us copy last week's newsletter and change some important things and send it out again next week or this week. And it saves time, and it's how we think about it, and it's easy when there are a million other things in our parish lives to do. And if your congregation has been looking at this newsletter for many months and the format, even where things are arranged, right, they have grown used to it. So maybe for stewardship season, as you want to highlight various pieces of your ministry, change up your format a little. If that's using some different colors or some fonts or changing the order that people expect things in, let people know that things are different. Many of you are probably on the diocesan mailing list, DioCal News and Events, and you'll notice that that is a technique that Stephanie Martin-Taylor uses when she creates that newsletter. Things aren't always in the same order. You see things move around a little bit differently, and it's so that we have to work for what we want. And then we gaze through the whole newsletter to find what we're looking for. It'll be a little different. So we switch it up a little every once in a while. I'm recommending that you might think about that as you move through your stewardship season. All right, so the how and the who and the what of our stewardship this year. So if you've used the TENS materials in the past, One of the things that is new this year is that we have a guide, and you're looking at the guide up on the top here of your slide. We have a guide that you can download that has all of these instructions on it, so that you can, there's a timeline and this how-to guide, the instructions for how to do a virtual campaign, so that you can use that information. That's new this year because we've never had to do that before. So you're looking at a piece of this year's material. We first say that right now, in August, you should be, hold on, I'm gonna let some people into our jolly cohort. Hello, new participants and friends, welcome, we're glad you're here. I just let you into the waiting room. I saw that it was active. If you could just put yourselves on mute, please, then we won't have your ambient noise. And please use the chat at the bottom of your screen to put questions. And every once in a while, I will stop the presentation to ask some questions. So thank you, welcome. So now in August, you should be recruiting your stewardship committees. You should be getting them ready and preparing them. And you should be lining up who might give your testimonials or your peer-to-peer conversations. We're going to talk more about how that works and our recommendations around that later. If you are running some weekly stewardship meetings or meetings throughout the stewardship cycle, we recommend that you invite a very diverse group of speakers to share their testimonials and their ideas. When we talk about our gifts and why we support a congregation or the ministries, we are inviting people into making their own thoughts and their own gifts about that. So it's often nice when we set up those testimonials to have members of the choir and of the youth group and of key committees or key ministries, so that people can really speak authentically about the things that make them feel passionate and empowered about your ministry and your church. We're going to recommend, and I'm going to move through in a bit, some small groups, and specifically small groups around stewardship. So one of the things that we're suggesting you be doing in August is to recruit some people who can host these small group meetings. Small group meetings are things that you probably may already be running when you do stewardship. I know in my community at Holy Innocents, one of the things we love to do is dinners at stewardship season, where people meet in each other's house and share their personal stories. Well, we're not going to be meeting in each other's houses and having dinner this year. So finding ways to have virtual groups connect and meet to do that work of small groups may be a strategy that you can use. And we'll walk through why we're recommending that strategy this year in a little bit. And then the what. So we want you to be thinking now, if you haven't already started, thinking about what goes into your stewardship packet. What are the materials that you'll want to send out by post and email to your members? Your case for giving. So a case for giving is you may be doing a trifold brochure in your congregation already, or a half sheet of paper, whatever it is that you have produced in the past that tells people how the money comes in and where the money goes and why we do what we do. Maybe it has testimonials or pictures or stories about things that have happened throughout the year, people being able to contribute to that. So you should be developing your case for giving now. And we can talk about some strategies or some ways that you might use that and do that work together. If you're doing a budget, a narrative budget, or the line item budget, maybe both, in your stewardship packet, make sure that you get that information out. A narrative budget is a really great way to both tell the story of a congregation and explain how the money is spent in different key ministry areas. It's a really easy way to explain what we do with the stewardship gifts that people give us. So make sure that you include some kind of budget and financial transparency in that stewardship document. And then, of course, pledge cards. So this year, TENS has a format. It's a part of the downloadable materials, and you can customize the pledge card with your own parish or congregation information on it. But that is also a tool that you should put into that pledge packet. We also offer a timeline, and I'm going to walk through this with you. A timeline, the next 3 slides are going to be more details about when you should be doing things and what are some of the tasks that we should do as a part of this pre-stewardship campaign season that we're in. So start early. You are here now, and this is great. Thank you for being here in August to do this work. It's much better to start in August than in September because it gives everybody a little bit more time. And if you've noticed, everything takes a little bit longer in the pandemic. So getting your groups together, giving people the time and space to think about what they're doing and invite key leadership, start early. We talked about this earlier, research your technology and test it. So is your, if you're doing a virtual offering plate, if you are, and we talked about that in our last session together, you can watch the video and see the slides where we talk about many of the pieces of software that churches use to collect money and to do pledge, online pledging. So if you're using some of that and it's new for this year's stewardship campaign, research it now, implement it, and test it so that it's ready to go. Build the hype. Use these months of August and September to talk about the exciting campaign that's coming up. Really start to build this up. TENS offers a few different tools to help you set the stage for your fall stewardship campaign. We do a August reflection. So that takes sort of a summary of the Gospels that happen in the month of August and wraps a stewardship idea around it. It's something that you could be sending out now in your newsletter or referring to it or basing a sermon on it if you'd like. It's a tool that we give you to start getting people thinking about a stewardship campaign. We also have a flyer at TENS that you can download that talks about why we picked this theme of faith-filled generosity. It has a little scripture passage about it. People can think more deeply about how our generosity is formed by our faithful relationships with each other. So prepare theologically and build the hype. We recommend that you drop the first letter, the first mailing, and TENS gives you a format for a letter from the clergy and a letter from either the stewardship chair or the senior warden, however you want to tweak that. We recommend that you drop that first letter from the clergy in September. Give it plenty of time to arrive in the mail, or if it's an email, give it time to be digested in people's inboxes and read. That sets the stage for what is coming and how people are thinking about it. If you're doing this in email, it's very easy to do. You can just send it out and it's done, and it gets people expecting that something is going to be happening soon in stewardship. I have a couple more slides to go, and then I'll stop and see if there are any questions so far. So during the campaign, we recommend that you run your campaign through October and November. This year, it may be taking a little longer. Often we like to do quick stewardship campaigns because we don't want it to drag on. It feels like that sometimes in church if we're just doing stewardship Sunday after stewardship Sunday. But this year, I think we may need a little bit more time to give people the time to absorb it and think about it. So we're recommending that you start either on October 4th, or if you use St. Francis Sunday as a big animal day and you've got something to do where you're going to virtually figure out how the dogs and the cats and the snakes work, you may use the next week, the 11th, to kick off your campaign. Either way, we recommend it as early in October as you can. Hold a special virtual coffee hour to kick off your celebration after whatever principal service. If you're only doing one virtual service or if you're doing multiple, try to do a coffee hour following that would be like what you would do if you were gathering together, and celebrate this year's stewardship. Maybe have some speakers, not just the treasurer to talk about the budget, but some folks who can also, numbers are exciting, but they're not exciting to everyone in the same way. So share some great stories about what's going on and invite people to speak virtually. You can do that on Zoom, this platform, or on whatever platform you're using. I was speaking recently with a rector of a congregation in Akron, Ohio, and she was lamenting how normally they have a big blowout for their kickoff Sunday, where they have a catered lunch in one of their members' homes, and it's beautiful, and people are looking forward to it every year, and how this year they won't be able to do that. And what they're doing instead, which I think is pretty ingenious, is they've contacted a local caterer, and everybody's going to go and pick up their bag and bring it home and be able to share that feast together virtually. So they're still doing a lunch following their service, only you'll have to go and pick up your bag from the catering company and bring it to your family and share that way. It was a really innovative way, I thought, for a congregation that has this tradition to participate in this part of their tradition. So whatever you're doing, make your kickoff Sunday special, and be pretty excited about it. As soon as you've had that kickoff, it's time to drop your next letter from either your senior warden or your stewardship chairs. And that's the time to put your stewardship materials out to people. So if you're doing it in post, or if you're doing it in email, or if you're doing it in both, think about that. We're no longer able to rely on people picking up their envelope at the back of the church on their way out. So you're going to have to think about how you get it to people this year. Postage, they can be expensive if you're using a big packet or an oversized envelope. So think about that. Try to do it via email whenever you can, because that's easy and shareable and cheaper. But whatever way your congregation needs it, make sure that you do it. And you can do it in both ways, right? Some people will never open their emails, so you know to send them things in the mail. You already know your congregation well enough to suss that out. TENS offers weekly pledge inserts to move through the stewardship season. So from October 4th through November 22nd, there is a weekly meditation reflection, and it takes a reading of the day and draws a stewardship theme out of it. Melanie wrote one of ours. Thank you very much for doing that this year. We have a real diversity of voices, and what we do with those is ask people. You can use them for a small group conversation. Each of those meditations has a couple of questions that get our minds thinking about stewardship. So you can use them for that. You can use them as sermon prep if you want, and you can use those in your small groups. One more slide before we talk a little bit about some of the other challenges, and then we will move into the small group process. Dedication Sunday. So if kickoff was big, dedication, or the end of your campaign, should also be a celebration. Make certain that you use that opportunity to announce your totals, to celebrate everybody's participation. If you have things that you want to highlight, like we got more households pledging this year than last, or if people increased their gifts by this much, use those numbers to generate some excitement around that. We're going to talk at the very end about some liturgical resources that we have to help you focus on the dedication and on the offertory. But pay special attention on your dedication Sunday to blessing the pledges that have come in, commending them to the work that they will do for the year, and helping our congregations know why they are giving and what the beauty of those gifts will provide. Thank everyone. Make sure at those dedication Sundays you thank all the people who hosted small groups, who served on committees, who stuffed envelopes, who took the time to talk or speak or think about why they made their pledge, and of course everyone who made a pledge. Make sure you use as many acknowledgements as you can. Stewardship is a community event, and it takes all of us to participate in it. And so make sure you give people their proper due. As always, remember the mission. So often in stewardship, we talk about budgets and needs of the church, and those are real things. We need to talk about them and think about them, but we also need to remember why people give, why the church exists in the first place, how we do our work in the world, how we improve the lives of our neighbors and reach out to other communities. So as you're thinking about your stewardship, and especially at your dedication Sunday, remember the very many ministries that your congregation is engaged with and highlight them. That's why we do what we do. Finally, and this is the hardest thing for stewardship committees to remember to do after months of work and effort and thinking and doing, there are still households that haven't turned in their pledges on dedication Sunday. So implement a follow-up plan and implement it quickly so that people can build on the momentum. It doesn't linger and drag out into January as sometimes it can do. Get that committee going, take a minute to celebrate, but then, get them on the phone on Monday or Tuesday and say, how do we close these gifts and get everybody who can participate in this year's work to participate. So follow up, create a follow-up plan and implement it. Are there any questions that people have about this work before we move on into some of the other areas? I can't see all of your faces, but I can, if you raise your hand or you type something into the chat, I can answer it for you. You guys are all pros already. All right. I don't see, oh, Ron, I see a question. Do you want to unmute?
I'm unmuting. Can you hear me?
I can.
Let me ask a question or raise a point related to the theme of faith-filled generosity. 2021, as we all know, I mean, there's always, all of us have, both in leadership and also in a personal perspective, at the end of the fall, it's always a leap of faith every year when we make a pledge for all of the following year, because there are always unknowns, but we do that in faith. 2021 is going to be maybe a much bigger leap of faith than usual, because so much more is going to be unknown than a normal year. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on how should we really talk about the elephant in the room that's going to be on people's minds when they get ready to fill out that pledge card.
Yeah.
should we be proactive about that? Should we address that?
Mhm.
Most churches have kind of an unwritten policy that if something really bad happens to you economically somewhere during the following year, that of course you're not going to be expected to go into debt or something else to go figure out how to fulfill your pledge. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a little bit, if whether
Happy.
it's the pandemic should cause us to be proactive about that.
I'm going to walk through. You're turning the corner a little bit, which is beautiful, into the next set of 3 slides that I'm going to share, where we talk about those elephants in the room and some of the sticky questions that people might be asking. But so we'll go into detail about those in a second. But as a general point, yes, I think we should be able to talk about um, the reality of the situation we're facing and the compassion that we feel for each other and with each other as we speak about stewardship and our gifts and our giving. There's no shame in having to change your pledge throughout. And as we talked about in the last session, when we spoke briefly about the relational piece of stewardship, uh, when I speak with people about a gift that they're making to their church or to the diocese, we spend a little bit of time talking about money, but we spend a lot of time talking about everything else that's happening in their lives. Because money is a way that we express a lot of our joys and our frustrations, and that boils down into church as well. So when I speak with donors, potential donors about a gift, I often hear stories about retirement or kids going to college or medical concerns or the joys that they're experiencing or the abundance or plans that they're making, hopes and dreams. These are relational conversations, and they're also pastoral conversations. And by way of that, I want to make a plug for a specific way of thinking about pastoral relationships and stewardship. If you are one of those congregations that doesn't tell your clergy how people participate in stewardship, I urge you to please abandon that old theology and do talk about stewardship with your clergy. It's a pastoral, beautiful conversation, and we can trust our clergy to have the same beautiful boundaries and love that they have with us when we talk to them about any other deeply personal thing, as we do when we might talk about our money with them. So it's a pastoral conversation, Ron, and we should engage that pastorally. We're going to go through some more details about those questions just in a minute. So I'll come back even more deeply on that. Beth asks if there are graphics available for online use. Beth, can you be more specific about the kind of graphics you're looking for?
I guess just like say that is this image available to download and use, that sort of thing.
This image?
The faith-filled
Oh,
generosity.
heck yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So in the materials that you can access, and before you leave, I will sprinkle through many times in the chat the website and the login information if you don't already have it. The logos in English and in Spanish, in vertical and in horizontal, are given to you in all the ways, as pictures, as vectored Illustrator images, however you do your layout, we have an option for you.
Okay, great.
Yep. Melanie asks how we should reach out to folks who are parishioners, but who are not parishioners, but who are joining us for virtual Sunday worship. What a beautiful question, and what a beautiful thing to have happen in these virtual times. We are expanding our reach, and it's a low touch, easy sell for people to join a virtual service and feel like they don't have to have an awkward, if they feel like church is awkward for them, they don't have to experience that shaking hands or figuring out where to sit. So virtual services are really opening up members of our congregations that we don't normally see, or members of the community, or people who have left the community and want to feel some kind of homecoming or some kind of tie. So yes, I think we should include them and invite them into stewardship. They are finding something by joining you and joining us in those Sunday services, or, you know, some people are skipping Sunday service and doing the other virtual things that churches are offering right now, book groups or coffee hours. That's church too, in a way. So all those ways that people are participating virtually are ways that we can engage them with that work. And if they see the benefit of it, they see the community involvement, and we can use that as a opportunity to deepen our relationship with them, you know, understand maybe why are you here, put them into a small group, get them talking. It's a great way to introduce them to other people and be able to hear about the missions that you may support or the other kinds of work that you may do. If you do nothing and they don't want to participate in a small group, just asking them, inviting them to participate and think about what the online community that they've been a part of for these months has meant to them. You can look at it purely like that kind of a, I don't want to say transaction because it's not, but you can ask them what value they are getting out of that and how they would like to support this community that they have found themselves a part of. They may or may not be Episcopalian, and they're just coming because they see what's happening and they want to be a part of it. So wherever they are on that journey, let's not assume that they aren't going to participate in stewardship. They may not make your biggest gift. They may not pledge every year from now forever, but they may participate this year either in a one-time gift or in an ongoing pledge because they care about what you're offering. So always, yes, always ask, invite. We don't do things that we're not invited to do. Are there any other questions before we move into, Lois has a position statement that hope-filled generosity instead of just faith-filled generosity. Thank you, Lois. You are absolutely right. As Christians, we are people of hope. All right, I'm going to, yes.
Davey, I don't know if you can see me. My screen is dark. It says Cordai.
I can't see you, but I hear you.
I don't know how to show you my face, but anyway.
Let me try to invite you to start your video.
Okay. Okay, I press the start my video. Okay.
There you are.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome.
I attend Christ the Lord Church, where Sandy McNeil also attends. I had a question. I know this sounds kind of negative, but I have this sense that some of the congregation might think that why pledge when much of what we're facing, certainly the rest of this year and possibly a good part of next year, will have to continue to be virtual because of the pandemic. And some people may think, why am I paying? Why am I giving this money when there is no full participation? How can we respond to that?
I think that's I would love if somebody actually came out and asked that question, because it's a great opportunity to ask them what community is to them, what they feel as a part of community. You used the word, if they're not participating fully. And so I would ask, what does full participation feel like? Is that Eucharist and not hearing the word? Is it not seeing each other's face, but being able to shake hands? What makes that person feel that what they are experiencing isn't a fullness of the body of the faithful gathered? So those are great conversations. Again, Cordai, those are pastoral, relational questions that if people ask them, it's a great opportunity to talk with them about what their gifts mean and why. And I think then from another standpoint, you know, Lois is working just as hard now, even perhaps harder, to stay in touch with the congregation as when people are meeting in person. So the work that's being done by clergy and office staff and volunteers, even though they're not meeting in person, is still happening. It just doesn't look the same as when people are gathering. So it's a good reminder that we are still being led by leaders who have dedicated their lives to this formation and who are drawing a salary to do this work. And we are part of that relationship. And so just because we aren't gathering in person doesn't mean that that work isn't being done. And then I think finally it's a conversation. So we'll talk a little bit later about some appreciative inquiry questions that we can ask in small groups that get people dreaming about what is possible. And I always think that when someone comes at something from a transactional or what am I getting out of this standpoint, to ask them what they dream could be possible and what they really want to see is another way to frame that conversation and get them thinking about what's possible. I think you bring up a really important point, though, and I think that we are going to get some questions from folks. So that my final point on that is that as you are forming your small groups and as you're forming your stewardship chairs, take the time to form them for the kinds of conversations, the pastoral, relational, deep conversations that people have when we talk about money. It's not just about fill out some pledge forms and send them in, but it's deep sharing that we're doing in community. It's beautiful, hard, beautiful work. Thanks for offering that question. I think it's a big one and it's on our minds. Anne asks if we can use breakout rooms in Zoom. Absolutely. If you want to run one, we're meeting at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6:30 to do our small groups and to use the breakout sessions so people log in once. If you know how to run through that process and assign people the breakout rooms, go for it. The diocese is offering, I hope you all know this, and if not, I'm telling you, the diocese is offering 2 hours to every congregation of consulting. We've hired a tech consultant to walk through technology issues around virtual gathering in congregations. And you have access to that team, and they will set up a meeting with you and answer your questions. So if you don't know how to run a breakout session in Zoom, or if you're trying to pick between Facebook Live or whatever, they will walk you through that and train you on that. And that is work that has come out of Abbott's budget this year, and she's retained a consultant specifically to talk about technology. So if you don't already know how to do it, there are people who do, and they will teach you. So please take advantage of that and contact Abbott, the Canon to the Ordinary, to get more information on how you and your church can link up with that. Ann Knight asks, any ideas for creating enthusiasm when people are zoomed out? Ugh, I know, right? Hopefully, and so I'm a small group guy, right? I love to meet often in small groups, and that's just my peculiar nature, but I understand it's not for everybody. I am recommending, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that every congregation, when they implement these small groups, do at least 3. So 3 over 8 weeks isn't as intense as 1 every week. You can do 1 a week if you have the bandwidth and people for that. But at least 3, a kickoff, a sort of a Bible study mid-review, and then sort of the final invitation to make a gift are the 3 essential ones that people should do. I think that this is really a time also to, I mean, so you may be using your Zoom coffee hours to do some great conversation between members, or maybe you're doing a socially distanced parking lot, roll down the window conversation. I don't know how you're doing some of your gathering, your socializing during this time. But this should be seen as a time for socializing. It's not just church, it is the social side of church. So maybe that could create some enthusiasm for folks. Finally, I would suggest that these groups meet for 90 minutes at the max. So I find that after about an hour and 15 minutes, I lose interest in any conversation, no matter how good it is on Zoom, because you just, you know, you're looking at little boxes and people's faces, and so we all have an attention span with it. All right, I'm going to move on with some of the sticky questions that I think we're going to talk about that Ron invited us into earlier. So, how to talk about money when there's economic fear or pandemic-related unemployment. It's real. We can't ignore it. It's going to happen this year in our congregations, and we should be ready for it. So, we started by reminding that there is no shame in a household pledging less than this year than in other years. Every gift matters. So reminding people that whatever they can do is great. We also remember that some families are not struggling right now. So because we may have a fear, or some of us are, not every household is experiencing the economic moment that we are in the same way. So we shouldn't assume that some people won't increase their giving this year. There are some households that do feel comfortable and are in a place where they can do that. So yes, some people may go down in their giving, some people may raise their giving. Let's be open and ready for that. We've talked about pastoral conversations. Every single conversation about a pledge is deeply meaningful and personal. So we've been through recessions before, even recently. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking about as we are talking about our stewardship this year is that it was only a few years ago that we went through this recession and our church budget shrank, and we talked about uncertainty, and there was real pain in some parts of the Bay Area, and we recovered. So reminding people that we will recover again, that it looks bad right now, but it won't be bad forever, that it really will change and we really will come back, is a good reminder of our, as Lois pointed out, our Christian hope. Our hope for our faith-filled generosity is that we will get through this and be able to come back. Also, this gets back to our mission. So just because church is meeting virtually or in a different way, or just because we have less than we had before, the needs in our community are certainly not less. People are more hungry for services than they have been in a long time. And those services are different. Maybe they are about food and shelter and the basics, but they're also about reaching out and staying connected and battling really severe isolation that people are feeling right now. So the need for what we do is more acute than it's been in other years, or in recent years maybe. Another elephant in the room. So how to talk about stewardship if you're facing budget cuts, if your budget is going to be less this year than it was last, if you're looking at cutting programs either entirely or reductions, or if you have staff reduction as a part of your budget forecast for next year. So this is a scenario that I could imagine some congregations may be in as we are looking, and we need to be ready for people to engage this question and to help each other out through this question. One of the ways to do that is to be focused on the mission. So yes, times are tough. Yes, budgets are changing. Let's acknowledge that and grieve and support, but also remind people that our neighbors still need us. We are still going to do the work. Maybe we'll reduce some of our programs if we absolutely have to, but we are still going to be feeding the hungry and taking care of the poor and walking with the lonely. These are things that we do, and we will continue doing them. So focus on the mission. Remind people that your church leaders have been thinking about this since April, or since the pandemic really started to change our lives. Your diocesan leadership, your church leadership, your clergy and your vestry and your bishops committee, maybe they applied and received a PPP loan. Maybe they didn't, but they tried anyway. Remind them that people have been working really hard all year long to keep things as stable as they can. This helps remind people that it's not just their own gifts that make up the finances of a church, but there are lots of pieces and many players in it. So help people remember that, that there are lots of ways that we have been working all year round to make certain that we are solvent and surviving this moment. Also, and this is important, so not every member is struggling right now. There may be some members who can still make an extraordinary gift to cover unexpected shortfalls. They may be in your congregation. You may know who they are. You may have been saving them because you are thinking about a capital campaign or a big project, but maybe this is the year to ask them if they'd be willing to make an extraordinary gift. Again, the worst they can say is no. Ask, you'll never get what you need unless you ask for it. And remember that some people will be really honored by participating in that with you. Finally, how to talk about stewardship in times of uncertainty. And this was another question that Ron asked us to think about earlier. We're going to be presenting budgets that may look different. We may be looking at a different forecast in our own personal lives. So I remember this section from Matthew's Gospel, and we read it back in Epiphany. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Not sure about the value question. I think birds are pretty great and some people aren't. But in general, I think that we need to remember that we have faced uncertainty before. And as Lois reminds us, we are people of hope. We move through that and we do look at uncertainty through a lens of hope and fulfillment and reaching through it. Also, so there's no shame in people making less of a pledge than they did last year. There's no shame, none whatsoever, in making a pledge and then changing it as your circumstances change or your reality sets in. And those are great conversations that do not have to be painful, awkward, or embarrassing. They are pastoral. And they don't just have to be with the treasurer, they can be with the clergy. And they can come with all the things that that conversation would be in. And it ends with mutual support and prayer and love and affirmation. Every gift is meaningful. And even if somebody has to cancel their pledge, make certain that they know going into it that we hope that they don't, but that they can. And that's what separates us. We're not collecting people, right? There's no one busting kneecaps around here. We are in the business of supporting each other and helping each other through hard times. So remind people, pledges can be changed. Also, people may be making gifts through securities. remember that. So the stock market hasn't disappointed in some ways. And so if people are making gifts through securities, they may have gifts to give, and they may be comfortable doing it. There are tax implications, and we can talk about that in more detail if you want, but there are lots of things that people may be thinking about. So what matters most is that we teach that all giving matters, and we make people feel comfortable participating in the ways that we can. Are there any questions before I move on to the next piece, which is about the small groups? Great. Thank you for engaging those questions. You'll get these slides as a part of this presentation, so use them with your stewardship committee to help plan for these conversations. So using the weekly inserts, they are, so this is, now we're getting back to the resources and what they look like for your campaign this year. So each week from October 4th through November 22nd, we have a meditation that moves through one of the readings and gives a theological stewardship framework. They can be used in a coffee hour or in a small group or as sermon prep. Each of those reflections suggests a few questions that get us thinking theologically on stewardship topics. As evidenced earlier, we have a real diversity of voices across the church, bishops and lay people and clergy who from all over the country who have put together this year's weekly resources, and they are to help us frame our own conversation about our stewardship theology. So these small groups I keep talking about, I'm a small group guy, and I think that in a lot of ways, small groups can help us create the kinds of community that will help our stewardship be successful this year. In times of distancing, these small groups can be led by lay leaders, members of your stewardship committee, and they can be little facilitated groups, meditations, Bible studies. I think that they are the best way that you can develop meaningful formation about money and mission. Who should be leading these groups? So I put together a little job description. So a group leader should be committed to stewardship. They should have already made or be making their own pledge. They should understand the theme and why your church participates in stewardship. Knowing and believing the case for giving, so they can answer questions about your budget and about the mission and ministry, or they can direct people to people who know the answers if they don't have them. So people who are comfortable talking about why they are members and why they support the church and can speak to that case. The job description for a small group leader is that they are a good listener or a facilitator. So it's not about having all the answers. It's not about directing the conversation so much as it is providing the framework and making sure that people participate and nudging it along when needed. So it doesn't have to be about strong leadership. It has to be about collaborative, open leadership in those small groups. Keeping in mind that a small group, especially if it meets a few times, it's going to develop some intimacy, some mutual support, perhaps even vulnerability, as people share deeply about stewardship and their dreams. Your small group leader should be comfortable enough with technology that they can run a small group virtually. So that includes things like the waiting room, if you employ it, admitting people, answering questions, getting a link out to people so that people can participate. You know that there's been a lot of conversation about Zoom and security. You'll see that we implemented some of those techniques today by asking you to register, and then by having a waiting room so that I could verify you're a real person before admitting you in. Those are ways that we protect our communities while still keeping them open. How many small groups should you have? I think that a small group should be between 6 and 12, because fewer than that, and if somebody can't make it, then you're starting to sort of dwindle off. More than that, and not everybody can speak within an hour. So I think 12 is a nice high number, and 6 is a good low number. Obviously, if you have a huge number of people who want to participate and a small number of people who can lead, you'll have larger groups. These numbers are just guidelines. And finally, I think, as I said before, that each group committed to doing this should be able to meet or commit to meeting at least 3 times through the process. Oops. What are these 3 times? So at kickoff, this could be immediate. This could be at your kickoff, as somebody earlier suggested, where you have breakout sessions where maybe everybody gathers and then your small groups begin to form immediately. Or it can be later that week or the next week where you have that first small group meeting to walk through the stewardship materials, the case for giving. Do you have some pre-recorded testimonials that people have said, this is why I participate in the youth group, and this is what I really like, or this is what singing in the choir means to me? Your job as a small group leader in this moment is to ensure that everybody has materials and pledge cards. The second meeting I'm suggesting is a Bible study, and I'm going to show a whole bunch of options for Bible studies that get us thinking theologically about stewardship. And then the third one is that appreciative inquiry question. And I'll walk through those 2. At the end of that meeting, that third one is when the host should invite everyone to make their gift and to pray and turn in their pledge cards in the way that you're doing that. When you're doing a Bible study in a small group format, what does that look like? I think a lot of us are already using a format similar to this if we do Bible study. It's sort of a modified Lectio Divina kind of thing, where we read the passage a few times from a few different voices, and we ask questions throughout that process. You'll get this slide, so if you want to recreate it for yourself, you can, or you can adapt it for your own use as you may. So what inspires us? What is God saying to us? And then what are we called to do because we've read this passage together? You'll get this slide too, so you don't have to write down all of these right now. These are great examples from the Hebrew scriptures and Christian tradition to develop a Bible study on the theme of stewardship. I'm gonna take a drink of water here. The third small group that I recommend having is that last one, that appreciative inquiry, dreaming and visioning. For those of you who haven't experienced the process or model of appreciative inquiry, it's a way of thinking that focuses on what is possible, what's good, what's exciting. It intentionally does not ask negatively framed questions. So it doesn't say, what's the problem with this? Or what problem are we trying to solve? It looks at the beauty and the abundance and the positive thinking. This is not so that we squelch problems, because this process certainly allows for problems and conflicts and questions to arise. But it helps us frame the conversation in a positive light so that people can get ready to go and be excited about the work that we're doing. So these questions are questions that you might ask in a small group about stewardship that are open-ended appreciative inquiry styled questions that help get us thinking about why we pledge and what we are doing in our communities. After this, I suggest that your leader, the leader of your small group, make the ask. So that's not to say that they're saying, Davey, will you give $100 this year? We're really counting on you. It's not a hard sell, but it is saying, Davey, you have your stewardship materials. If you haven't already filled them out, I invite you to join me. Please make your pledge this year. Will you join me? This is the question, right? So we shouldn't leave this conversation without asking the question. If we don't ask, we never receive. Well, some things we do, grace, for example, but money, not so much. So make the ask, and it doesn't have to be a hard sell or a specific amount. Will you make your gift this year? Will you participate in this year's stewardship? And let people answer that. Yes, I'm thinking about it. I'm not able to. Any of their answers are beautiful, faith-filled answers. We must treat their answer and their process for making a pledge as intentional as it is. They are prayerfully considering this. They are responsible to themselves and their family. So we have to assume that whatever answer they give has been thought out, and it is blessed. It is their gift and their choice. But do ask, make the ask. Will you join me in making a gift this year? This might be the controversial part of these small groups, because Episcopalians asking for money, it's not our favorite thing. It's an invitation to join. Before we move on, are there any questions about, I've talked a lot about small groups, process. What are some of your questions that have come up during this? You can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and speak. You're all small group experts. I'm also cognizant of the time. We are about to wrap up. Seeing no questions. Oh, I am getting a question. It's been said that I should point out that people might be able to increase their pledges in 2021 if a recovery takes hold and work resumes. So absolutely, as we are casting that uncertainty of 2021, we should acknowledge that things might bounce back more quickly than our economists predict, right? Things could come back, and they come back for different sectors and different households and different communities in different ways. So what applies to one family doesn't apply to all families. Being sensitive to that is something that we should be doing, but we shouldn't assume that everyone's experiencing this in the same way. So yes, please do point out that some people may be willing and able to increase. And then a question about the small groups. Can they be organized around each category identified in the narrative budget? That keeps the focus on mission. I like that, and I like it a lot. And it also means that if all you're interested in is the choir and you join the choir group, you may not hear about the food program piece as much, or the youth mission trip, or the other kinds of work that your congregation may be engaged in. So I think that those small groups, they can be affinity related, so that you put people together that have something to do with each other, but maybe it's less around the mission of the narrative budget, because then that makes you force into like one thing. Versus like maybe get all the knitters and quilters and crocheters together, or maybe get the people who love gardening and nature walks together. Those sorts of affinity groups, when they meet and talk about the gifts that they're providing, give a diversity of answers, but they have this thing in common. and they may be naturally forming community in their church anyway. So that's a good way that these small groups can kind of form up around each other. Another way is simply by, creating a Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet, and allowing, here are the 7 groups that are forming. Put yourself into one of them. You can see where people are. So allow people to sign up for their own groups. People always like that. Another way is to is to have the people who are leading maybe go through the directory and pick people that they know. So in that example, I would say if you are doing a group of 12, we'll say, that you pick 8 people you know and 4 you don't, so that you can get out of your own clique too, and you can get to know more people and invite some community within that. So there are lots of ways for those small groups to form that make it feel natural and community oriented. Thanks for that question. Are there other questions about small groups? We have one section of slides left, and that's about liturgical resources. So I've been to a lot of virtual services since March, and I've seen, Jane, I always go to ours, but I also see others, and I've been watching what's going on. One of the things that I notice doesn't happen the way it does when we are gathered in church is the offertory. There are no plates being passed. And so, and the elements, they're not coming up the aisle. They're sitting there at the credence table if there is a communion that's being offered spiritually. So that moment of drama, the offertory, doesn't happen. It's that time in the service where we focus on the gifts that we give back. If your congregation has figured out ways to do the offertory during virtual church, great. I'd love to hear about them. I also have some suggestions on how we can do them. So the first, I love this guy's cartoons. They show up in our church pension group calendars. Show me the money is not an approved offertory sentence. So I reached out to my good friend, Kay Sylvester, who is a priest. She was up at CDSP for a time. Some of you may know her there. She's now down at St. Paul's in Tustin, California. And she has written some alternate offertory sentences. I give these to you. She gives them to us to be able to use, just to shake things up a little differently. They help us focus on these themes of abundance and generosity, and they use a little different language. They're a little modern, some of them. They bring the 4 sacred directions. I love that one. The scattering our seeds in the hilltops and the mountainsides. So please use these or others as a way to gather us together during that offertory. And then some best practices for a virtual offertory. So we've made that invitation, those offertory sentences, and then we gather like any sacramental act. We invite and then we gather. So we're not passing plates, but sometimes we may use this moment for a moment of silence where people consider their pledge or what they've done or what they make. What they do for their giving. If you are the kind of community that is using Facebook to do your service and you're using Facebook to make your donations, you could put the URL for people to make their gift. During the offertory, you could have a moment of silence where people use their app-based giving tool to make their gift online. It's a way to acknowledge that people are giving. And if they do it by bank check or they're mailing in a paper check, even just saying in that moment, we're giving people time to think about the gift that they make to their community. So we invite, we gather, then we bless. So we bless those gifts that have come together and come to the altar. So if we're virtual, there's nothing to show for it, but we make that blessing. We show the love and the abundance that we have. One community I was talking with, they have a lot of check writers in their congregation who are sending in their stewardship checks, and they're like ripping open the envelopes, cashing the checks, but then they're saving those envelopes on Sundays and showing them as evidence that checks are coming in, stewardship is happening, we are still doing our offertory. So whatever ways liturgically you want to commemorate that and then bless those gifts is a beautiful way, and I recommend that we pay attention to the offertory even when we are gathered virtually. And then finally, so we invite, gather, we bless, and we break. So as our gifts are shared, we share them with the world. And it's a good time at the offertory, right before we begin the prayer of consecration or the Mass, if we are doing that in our virtual services, to remind people where their money is going, the various mission that is being supported by their gifts, to pray for that if it's a food pantry or a outreach program or a senior project or whatever it is, to name and bless and pray for those things. Are there any questions about liturgical resources and how we can create our offertory, or on anything that we've said? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to put us back into the big room so we can all see each other again. Look at that. Here we are. Any questions that people have or you'd like me to go over? Anne says that they use one at Christ Church. We live by faith, we give by faith. I love that. Giver of all good things, accept the gifts we bring, our faithful response to your abundant grace. That's a beautiful offertory sentence. What are some other questions that you have, or anything else I can cover? It's 5:23 and you're all like, why is this day not over yet?
Question. I have a question.
I've just put into the chat, if you don't know how to access the TENS resources, just as a reminder, as members of the diocese, which is a member of TENS, you get these for free. So the URL is in the chat. You can copy that chat and you can put it into your own window. The password is there, the login and password. And then I've asked you to fill out a survey, please. It's a 3-question survey, it'll only take you 2 minutes. Let us know what you learned and what you'd like to learn, and we'll do more webinars as stewardship season progresses. And if you want to sign up for other events, we are doing one in 2 weeks, a webinar on going even deeper into virtual communities. How do we really do that small group process and form a deep spiritual community on stewardship? And then we're doing one in September on galas, auctions, and events. If your church is one that relies on event-based fundraising at the end of the year, like a Christmas bazaar or a chili feed or a talent show where people buy tickets, there's no reason why you can't do those virtually this year. And so we'll run through some strategies and the software that you might use. Oh, Nancy, you had a question. Somebody said you were waving your hand. No?
On.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you would post the TENS resources thing, and then you did. So.
And then I did. I read your mind.
You read my mind. Thank you.
Great. Melanie says that they're about to ask folks to make specific gifts like donations for new cameras. Yes, I love that. So that's separate from your stewardship, I hope. Hopefully those people will still make their annual gift. Um, so this is a way of helping people understand the particular needs that we are in, and remembering that there are some people right now who can make above and beyond gifts to do some special work. I think that that reminding people that for the past 6 months, technology's been the only way that we're doing church and keeping things together. And you're making a specific ask for some cameras and lighting and sound equipment to do those virtual services better. Is that right? So I think it's a way to then say, help us, like if we had a leaky roof in the sanctuary, we might ask people to help make an extraordinary gift. Well, this is that time when we need people to make some extraordinary gifts if they can, to give us the technology that makes the services seamless. And it's good to be thinking about it because you're probably realizing that we're going to be in this for a while. And that when we go into a hybrid situation, that we may be well into 2021 before everyone is comfortable coming back to church again. Melanie, did you have other things that you wanted to say?
No, I guess the question is around timing. We've just purchased the new cameras, and I don't want it to overlap with stewardship, but I also want to have the open ask.
Right. So I think you bring up a really great point, and we often think about this when we think about stewardship. We don't want things to overlap with it, but life is not always following our calendar. And so I'm reminded of times in which our stewardship cycle still has to continue because we have to plan next year's budget, and we can still ask some people. So I don't know if you were thinking of, Melanie, targeted asks for some people, or if you're asking everyone to participate in this.
Both and.
Both and, good. Very Anglican of you. As I think the opportunity there is to actually combine it honestly with your stewardship, to say, make your pledge, and it's going to cost us this much money to put in some cameras this year, or this much equipment, or we've spent from our reserves this much to do it. And if you can make an additional gift, please do. And in doing so, in the both part of the both and, I would say you already have some specific asks from some key people who can raise that, some part of that amount. So you can say, some people have already made some extraordinary gifts, and we have 50% of it covered, and we're asking now for you to do. So the reason I put that into stewardship is because of the timing. Rather than coming up with a quick ask and then another ask, just combine it and be really clear. So we're not asking you to give us a lower stewardship gift. If you can only pick one or the other, give us your pledge, because that's participating in the whole life of the community. We don't want you to designate your gift just for technology, please. So help people make that. And it's just that kind of relational conversation. I bet if you ask that openly, that many people will make small gifts and some will make extraordinary gifts. You'll have to queue up some of those extraordinary gifts though with some targeted asks.
Thank you.
Ron asks if there's any future possibility to assist our Episcopal institutions with virtual fundraising. So they've been invited to join, and I thought Katie from St. Dorothy's was going to be on this call today. Absolutely, especially when we're talking about event-based, so they may not be as interested in stewardship as they are in event-based fundraising. I hope that our institutions get involved in those questions. We're going to be partnering up with Episcopal Impact Fund to do that webinar, and they are doing their big Night of Light this year virtually. And so they've been researching it and thinking about it all summer. So they're going to teach us some things about what they've learned and how it, and that's from a big institution. And then I'll be talking more about how parishes that do this work on a smaller scale might think about their events and online. So definitely. Are there some other questions or ideas? Well, friends, I really, really appreciate your time on this. We are right at 90 minutes, which is what I thought we might be at. So thank you for sticking it through with us. I will send you all these slides. I'll send it to everyone who registered, and then it'll also be posted eventually on our website. I will also send you a link to the video, which will be posted on YouTube so that you can share it with your stewardship committees, or you can go back and watch yourselves. It'll be great. And as ever, please, please fill out the survey. It'll help us get you the content that you want for future webinars. And please download the resources. They are free for you. So do it. Thank you, friends. Blessings for abundance and generosity in your stewardship. This conversation doesn't end here. You can always reach me on email or my cell phone, which I will put in the chat right now. I'm not at my office, so I'm not answering my office phone. Please, please be in touch with me. And if you have specific questions about how to run your stewardship this year, I'm absolutely excited to walk through that with you. Thank you, friends. Stay healthy, stay well, and have a beautiful day. Bye, friends. See you later.